voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Well, not quite. I hate to disappoint. It is not Scott Jennings. It is Jennifer Horn, who is happy to be in for Scott Jennings, who is off today. But don't worry. I'm going to help deliver some common sense for the American people on Scott's behalf today. We've got a whole can of common sense for you today. So thanks for joining us. I host the Morning Answer on Salem Radio in Los Angeles on AM 870, AM 590, The Answer, and am proud to be in for Scott Jennings today. And what a day it is. It's not a great day for Scott to be off because there's a lot going on. We had Tom Homan, the border czar, holding a press conference in Minneapolis at about 5 o'clock local time on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. We have President Trump, who is holding at this moment his 10th cabinet meeting, and we're getting updates from his cabinet secretaries. We're hearing more about Iran, Venezuela, some of the international tensions heating up, and then, of course, the tensions here at home in Minneapolis. So we have lots to go over today. We could be headed for a government shutdown, and that's where we will start in the news because Senate Democrats, they do a practice vote. Isn't that cute? I mean, these are full-grown adults with big jobs, but they do practice votes. It's like a practice quiz. Tomorrow, will a government shutdown happen? It looks like it based on what we saw unfold today. But President Trump will still have about 24 hours to see if he can make a deal with some key Democrats and, of course, get Republicans all on board to support the funding of the government. Of course, at odds is the ICE issue. Democrats, they like to crush ICE. Republicans, I think we realize that ICE is serving a great purpose right now and that we really need to cool tensions everywhere. We'll talk about that in Minneapolis here in a moment, but Senate Democrats threatening to block legislation that would fund the Department of Homeland Security and several other agencies on Thursday, potentially bringing a government a step closer to a partial shutdown if Republicans and the White House do not agree to new restrictions on President Trump's surge of immigration enforcement. And guys, I don't really think that's a wise idea. You cannot have Democrats, you cannot have these paid agitators, paid in many cases by foreign governments, foreign adversaries, be able to dictate what our immigration policy looks like in this country. It would be a bad step. You cannot let agents be run out of town. Certainly, can there be changes made? Yes. Is there a need for changes to be made? I think the answer is absolutely yes. That's what Tom Homan alluded to this morning. But to get out of town, to leave, to allow the masses to dictate how we enforce federal law, no. And these Democrats who are using ICE, which, by the way, has already been funded until 2029. So this is very performative. They'll shut down DHS, but that will only hurt the people who are looking for FEMA help because maybe they had problems to their property with the big ice storm, the snowstorm that just passed through the country. Another one I hear is on the way, this massive storm. The people who need those resources will not be able to get it because Democrats are upset about immigration. And I don't even know how upset they are. I think what they're upset about is that President Trump won on immigration. He delivered on his promise. And they're seeing these moments of chaos to distract from the fraud and from their own lack of leadership in their states and in their cities. And it's a distraction for them. It's a way to create chaos so that no one pays attention to the real problems. So if this shutdown happens, there are signs perhaps that maybe there is some progress coming. The White House has appeared open to trying to strike a deal with Democrats to avert the shutdown. The two sides discussing possible agreements to separate Homeland Security funding from the rest of the legislation and fund it just for a short time, according to sources who are familiar with the negotiations. And we'll see what happens. So there is still a chance that the government stays open, but it looks like, at least according to the practice vote, a cutesy little practice vote held by Senate Democrats today, that they could be headed towards a shutdown. Now, it was Minneapolis the scene this morning when Tom Homan, the border czar, spoke for the very first time after arriving in Minneapolis on Monday. And I've said earlier today, this was Tom Homan, I believe, is the man for the job in this time and place. He came in somber but focused, said that he's focusing on unifying these city leaders to help federal officials so that there can be a drawdown of federal agents in the city of Minneapolis. He laid out why that's important, how it harms the citizenry if it does not happen. and he took a lot of questions. Let's jump into some of the things that we learned from Tom Homan today. He says he's staying, by the way, until it's gone. This is cut 3.
Ground less than 3 full days. I got in here Monday. President of the United States called me Monday morning and asked me to deploy here. Got here Monday evening, and I'm staying till the problem's gone. But we've made a lot of progress in the last 3 days. Marcos Charles, he's running ICE operations here. There you go. Rodney Scott, Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, standing here beside me. Good morning, I'm Tom Homan, I'm the Border Czar for President Trump. I'm here on behalf of the President, along with U.S. Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Rodney Scott, and Marcos Charles, who's leading the enforcement effort here right now. I've been on the ground since Monday to regain law and order in the city beloved by many, and work together to remove threats from the community. During the past administration, we'll all remember.
All right, so that is Tom Homan, who spent a lot of time during the press conference talking about some of the things that he and Mayor Jacob Frey, the Attorney General Keith Ellison, and the Governor Tim Walz all came to agreement with. He said there's a lot of things they don't agree on. You can imagine that's true with that crew. But he said there are some things where they found some agreement. Let's take a listen to him talking about the Attorney General Keith Ellison, who said, and this is great, that Tom Homan held him accountable, that Keith Ellison said that the county jails can notify ICE if indeed criminal illegal immigrants are getting let out of jail, cut 5.
And he has clarified for me that county jails may notify ICE of the release dates of criminal public safety risks so ICE can take custody of them upon their release from the jail. And let me tell you why that's important. I know people are a lot concerned about the manpower has been sent in law enforcement manpower. Look, I've said this many times before. I've said it for the last several years. Give us access to the illegal alien public safety threat and the safety and security of a jail. It's common sense. It's safer for the community, it's safer for the agent, and it's safer for the alien. Because anything can happen on a street arrest. It just makes common sense. And for the people that argue, well, we're a welcoming community because we want victims and witnesses of crime that are here illegally to feel safe to come to police without fear they're working with ICE, we're not going to talk to the victim and witness of crime. There's no problem there. They should feel safe to come to police and ask for help. All we want is to talk to the person that local and state law enforcement authorities locked in a jail cell.
All right, so that was Tom Homan, the border czar, earlier this morning, talking about some of the places where there was some cooperation or at least some progress made with some of these local Democrats in the state and in the city of Minneapolis, particularly name-checking the Attorney General, Keith Ellison. Don't forget, used to be in charge of the Democrat Party and certainly knows politics. And he said that he had Keith Ellison clarify that there can be cooperation within county jails. These sanctuary policies are the reason that we have the problems that we do. The sanctuary policies were set up in an effort to encourage illegal immigrants to feel safe communicating with law enforcement to report crimes or maybe testify against someone, maybe call in domestic assault cases, those types of things, without fear of deportation. But where it's gone to a whole new level is instead of protecting the people who we could say are on the innocent side of things, well, instead, they use sanctuary policies to prevent police officers and jails from turning over turning over illegal immigrants to ICE agents in a calm and peaceful manner. So Tom Homan said he got the security and the approval from Keith Ellison to make sure that happens. We'll talk more about the policies in Minnesota that need to change so that ICE can start to withdraw on the streets of Minneapolis. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, it's Scott. I want to talk to you about our friends at Balance of Nature. You can find them, by the way, at balanceofnature.com. They have this thing called the Balance of Nature Whole Health System. These supplements are perfect for a resolution in the new year. It's kind of tough to stick with New Year's resolutions, and that's why Balance of Nature's Whole Health System supplements are one of the easiest ways to do it. They're very versatile. You do 2 scoops of fiber and spice and mix it easily into drinks, and it adds a warm, aromatic depth. You can also open 3 of your fruit supplements and mix the powder into a smoothie, or sprinkle 3 of the veggie supplements over one of the savory dishes that you're having for dinner. It's called Balance of Nature's Whole Health System. These supplements include 47 ingredients of 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers, perfect for your daily routine. 50% off if you do it now for 1 year when you subscribe to the Whole Health System from our friends at Balance of Nature. Get it at balanceofnature.com.
News, comment, and the stories and facts the mainstream media refuses to discuss. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks for joining us. It is the Scott Jennings Show. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott today. Taking a break. Should be back tomorrow. Keep you posted on that. I host the Morning Answer on Salem Radio in Los Angeles, AM 870, AM 590, The Answer. You can follow the Scott Jennings Show at Jennings Show. You can follow me on X at Jennifer Horn or on True Social there as well, Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and on Facebook. And one of the things that I love about Scott is that he works with the organization Child Help. And I do a lot of work for them in their local chapters in Los Angeles and in the Inland Empire, and they are a fabulous organization. Let me tell you about a story Child Help sees far too often. It started as a game, a kid logging on after school, talking with friends, having fun, then someone else joins the conversation. Now, at first, nothing felt wrong, just compliments, curious questions, someone paying attention, but over time, the messages became more personal, then private, then secret, and then uncomfortable. That's how online grooming works, not with overt force, but with trust. By the time the child realized something was wrong, they were scared, and they were scared to tell their parents, scared they'd get in trouble, scared they'd lose their devices or their friends. And this is where Child Help steps in. Child Help's life-saving programs focus on prevention education, intervention, and treatment, helping kids recognize grooming behavior before it turns into abuse, and helping parents know what warning signs to look out for. They teach kids the secrets about bodies aren't okay. They teach parents how grooming actually happens, slowly, quietly, and often right under our noses. And they help families take action when something doesn't feel right. This isn't about fear, it's about preparation. Because the truth is, every family is vulnerable and every family deserves tools to keep their kids safe. Your support makes this program and programs like these possible for just $27. You can help protect one child from abuse by funding Child Help's life-saving programs. Will you donate today? Will you save a child from all of that abuse? Text the word Child Help to 94878 and give $27, or you can donate online at childhelp.org/Scott. That's childhelp.org/Scott. If you're a parent, a grandparent, or someone who cares about the safety of our kids, this is worth supporting. Please help Child Help continue this life-saving work by donating today. Again, the website, childhelp.org/Scott, or text the word Child Help to 94878. All right, thank you for that. Now, I'm going to just admit something to you guys. We're just getting to know each other here on the Scott Jennings Show. I'm not the greatest driver. I try, but, I think it's important to know your strengths and your weaknesses. And if I ever struck it rich, I would definitely hire a driver. I would. That would be one of my top things. I win that lottery, I'd have someone just drive me around all day long. Not a Waymo, not an electric car, like a real live, can we call him a chauffeur? Is that politically incorrect anymore? I'd get a driver. But check this story out. There was a driver who was just taken into custody yesterday evening after police say the individual intentionally and repeatedly rammed a vehicle into the Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in New York City, damaging some of the Jewish site's doors. The NYPD and a spokesperson for Chabad Lubavitch, Molly Segleson, said that there was no apparent injuries to people inside. That's the good news. The vehicle was inspected by the NYPD bomb squad, and there were no explosives found. The driver shouted to bystanders that it slipped and said something to police about attempting to park. The NYPD commissioner, Jessica Tisch, said the crash was being investigated as a hate crime. I wonder if the mayor there, Zohran Mamdani, is going to chime in on this. You think he's going to chime in? The U.S. Justice Department also announced that it opened a civil rights investigation into the incident. According to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, she said, I've instructed our criminal prosecutors in civil rights to open a civil rights investigation into this violent attack. The mayor called the incident deeply alarming, and he had this one to say. I can't say it without smiling because it's Zohran Mamdani. He said, anti-Semitism has no place in our city. Just in his house with his dad, but not in the city. He was at headquarters and he was able to witness the scene. Now, here's the excuse, and this is why I say I would want a driver. And clearly, again, know your limitations. If you have trouble parking your car, maybe not a great idea to like ram 12 times into a building set up for Jewish people, because you are going to be looked at as an anti-Semite. And then when you're done ramming your car, and when I've had trouble parking, I've never backed up and just rammed my car into a door again. I just never have. To say that it slipped, you just happened to slip into a major place for Jewish worship in New York City? I don't know. Anybody else here? You can tweet me. If you think this was just an accident, at Jennifer Horn, send me a message on X. It slipped, apparently, or it was anti-Semitism. You be the judge. I'm Jennifer Horn. There is more up ahead. It's the Scott Jennings Show. Joining us, it is the Scott Jennings Show. I'm not Scott Jennings. That's your breaking news today. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings. Thank you for being with us today. But don't worry, he may not be here. We are still delivering common sense for the American people in droves today. I host the Morning Answer on Salem Radio in Los Angeles. Happy to be in for Scott. Now, joining us today, speaking of common sense, Representative Mike Collins is here. He is representing Georgia's 10th Congressional District. You can give him a follow at Rep. Mike Collins. And Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Now, it has been a year since the Laken-Riley Act was signed. I think one of the most important pieces of legislation, especially when we talk today in the context of hearing Tom Homan on the ground in Minneapolis, and he called those people out, Congressman, saying, you know, you choose to carry on about one group of people, but we didn't hear you crying quite as loudly when American citizens were killed by illegal immigrants. Why is it so important to remember the year anniversary today, Congressman?
Well, I think it's important to remember just the reasons why this had to become a law in the first place. You take a illegal alien criminal who broke into our country and then was arrested on several occasions before committing this heinous murder. And the Laken-Riley Act addresses that, you know. And Jennifer, I like to tell people, you know, when they ask me about this thing, I just look at everything from a business person's perspective. What's the problem? What's the solution? And how do we fix this thing forever? And when that young lady got murdered by that illegal criminal, and he was over here committing other crimes, but ICE was not allowed to local law enforcement wasn't allowed to contact ICE unless something major happened. And so there's where the Laken-Riley Act was born. It just simply stated that, local law enforcement can contact ICE when they're committing these like shoplifting or endangering children or carjacking, and get these folks off the streets before they continue to escalate in their criminal activity.
I do want to ask you, so you're here because, number one, you've got a campaign that you are running, which we want to talk about. Obviously, immigration is at the forefront. It's the year anniversary of the signing of the Laken-Riley Act, who lost her life tragically. She was murdered by a criminal illegal immigrant, and this could have been prevented. You, before we lost power, had said that there were so many gaps that needed to be filled, and that's what the Laken-Riley Act has done. Have you seen this in action in Georgia, Congressman?
Yeah, not only just in Georgia, but across the entire country. In 1 year time, we've had over 17,500 illegal criminals, immigrant criminals, that have been picked up and arrested by DHS. And that was all due to the Laken-Riley Act. Mm-hmm. So it's been hugely successful. It's part of the reasons that Tom Homan was in Minnesota, because now local law enforcement has the ability to contact ICE. And that's all they've been asking, is to work with ICE, work with Border Patrol. Let's get these people off the streets. Because at the end of the day, the basic basic things that the government needs to provide is protection for its citizens and keep them safe. And as far as that goes, Kristi Noem has been doing a fantastic job.
I'm glad to hear you say that. She's been taking a lot of incoming from Democrats, even some Republicans. And look, I think we have a great team. Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, Greg Bovino, everybody was doing something. Unfortunately, what we forget is the unknown, which are these agitators, which we believe are being paid maybe by our foreign adversaries. There's investigations going into that. These Border Patrol agents and ICE agents are under tremendous pressure to perform at top level. They have rape whistles in their ears. They're being spit at. They're having things thrown at them. Their cars are being hit, all trying to keep the streets safe. What do you think should happen next in Minneapolis? Certainly, we don't want to see these agitators, no matter how bad they are, lose their lives like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. They're putting themselves in ridiculous situations, but you don't want to see the loss of life. What do you think the solution is here in Minneapolis?
Yeah, no, Jennifer, you're exactly right. You never want to see the loss of life. But when you take a look at the scope of things, ICE is not in just one location. It's not like they're only in Minnesota. They're working all across this country. And if you look at the numbers, where I live here in Georgia, we're in the top 5 states for ICE picking up and getting off the streets these criminal illegal immigrants. So you don't see this problem in Georgia.
Yeah.
You don't see it anywhere else in the country except for Minnesota. So that gives you a good idea of, okay, what's going on different in Minnesota besides the fact that they're a sanctuary city up there. You've got a local mayor and you've got a governor who have been out there actually inciting this thing, saying that we're not going to work with ICE. You don't need to work with ICE. And that's just giving some of these people enough, I don't know, fuel on the fire to get them to where they get into harm's way like that. And instead, that local mayor, that governor up there should be working to make sure that they keep all citizens of Minnesota safe.
That's
just
right.
like the rest of the country is.
Selective outrage and selective protection do not work in this country. Now, Georgia is a very interesting state, and you are on the campaign trail. Give us an update on your campaign, and you've got some interesting stuff going on. Why should people not elect Jon Ossoff again, Congressman?
Oh, well, if you want to talk about Jon Ossoff and the fact that the guy is a one-term senator who has not done anything. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't even lift a finger to help on Lake and Riley. I mean, do you realize, Jennifer, I had to go get an Alabama senator, Katie Britt, to help push that bill in Alabama or in the Senate. And on top of that, for us to have a Democrat, because this was a bipartisan bill that came out of the House with over 30 Democrats signed on to it. You would think somebody like Jon Ossoff would go ahead and get on board with that. No, we had to get John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania just to help us push this bill.
The voice of reason,
At the end
surprisingly.
of the day, he finally had to flip and vote for it. But the people of Georgia understand that this guy not only shut down the government once to make sure that illegals have their health care. That's the whole reason he wanted to shut it down. Now he's wanting to shut it down to make sure we don't arrest these illegal criminals. This is the type of person that we have in the state of Georgia representing us in the U.S. Senate. Someone that votes the majority of the time with Chuck Schumer and gets the majority of his contributions from the state of California, those crazy Californians, most of them. Some of them.
Look, I can be crazy, but I do vote the right way, so that's okay.
But you talk about California supporting Jon Ossoff and these nut jobs up in New York.
Yeah.
That's where his money comes from, and he's essentially California's 3rd U.S. Senator. We've been in the lead in the polls in this thing since we got in it. We've got grassroots supports way further than anybody else. As a matter of fact, the last polling came out had me 2-1 over the second place candidate in this race. And there's 3 of us in this thing. So we know how to win this race. We'll win this thing. We'll come out of the primary in May, and we'll take on Jon Ossoff. And come next November, I'll give that joke here.
Absolutely. How can people get in touch? Real quick, we're up against the break, but what's your website?
You can go to MikeCollinsGA.com. You can use that actually to float across any of the social media platforms out there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you support. Love to have you help us.
Mike Collins, GA, this crazy Californian's going to help you, okay? Give him a follow right now at Rep Mike Collins and help him out. Volunteer, donate. It is it's what you should be doing. And I always tell people, especially in California, when you feel hopeless as a conservative, find a race in a state like Georgia, which is turning a little purpley, and support those candidates that have a real chance to make a difference. So we appreciate you and wish you the best of luck. Representative Mike Collins, thanks so much for being with us. I'm Jennifer Horn. There is more up ahead. It is the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, it's Scott, and I'm so excited to welcome Crowd Health as a new partner to the Scott Jennings Show. For several years, I'm hearing more people voicing frustration with traditional health insurance. Bad incentives baked into Obamacare have sent costs soaring. The rules are a maze of jargon, and people feel stuck. That's why I want to tell you about my new partner, Crowd Health. Crowd Health isn't insurance. It's a community that cuts out the middleman to help one another fund medical expenses, giving you more freedom, fewer surprises, and greater control over your healthcare choices. And when it comes to cost, members are spending hundreds less per month compared to traditional insurance. Right now, you can get started for just $99 per month for your first 3 months when you use the code SCOTT. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com and use code SCOTT. Again, joincrowdhealth.com, code SCOTT. Quick reminder, Crowd Health is not insurance. You can opt out, take your power back, and that is how we win.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Common sense for the American people. That's what Scott Jennings delivers each and every day, and it is a pleasure to be sitting in for him. I am Jennifer Horn. You can give me a follow at Jennifer Horn on X or on Twitter, Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and Facebook. And you probably saw or heard about Ilhan Omar. She was having some sort of, press availability where she was just hammering ICE agents. It's what she does. I think it's a hobby. Some people knit. She likes to talk about how terrible ICE is. And sitting at the podium, standing, Sarah, essentially someone from the front row, stood up and charged the podium. Now, she was ready for him. It was a tough cookie. She lunged right back, and then he squirted some brown, stinky liquid in her direction, which we now know is apple cider vinegar. Well, some folks, like Tim Walz, decided who they wanted to blame for this altercation. Let's listen to what, I can't call him the name everybody does, Governor Tim Walz. Tim Walz had to say about
Trump for what this attack on Representative Omar. Well, certainly, it's the tone that's in this country. This has all been said. I think it goes back, years of this type of political rhetoric. I can't specifically, and I know the subject. I talked to this representative last night. She was good, but this is the thing that there's no tone. And I said the president constantly attacks Representative Omar, attacks her citizenship, attacks the very decency of it, and we've asked him time and time again to stop it. I don't believe he's capable of stopping it. Not only are we
It's a really good thing that Ilhan Omar never attacks President Trump, right? I love the people who complain about the attacks when the attacks are happening all the time. I know President Trump can say some things that aren't nice. He's my favorite. I like to hear what he has to say. I think his nicknames are great. But look, I get it's not for everybody. And he does a fair amount of name calling. I'm honest enough to admit it. But have you heard what Ilhan Omar and her friends in the squad call President Trump? This is the new move, is to liken President Trump to Hitler and to say that the ICE agents are the Gestapo. I mean, if we had so many comparisons to Nazi Germany that was made just in the last few days by Democrats. So don't talk to me, Tim Walz, about the name calling. And how ridiculous to blame President Trump for somebody with the syringe filled with apple cider vinegar trying to attack Ilhan Omar. Well, the DOJ is not blaming President Trump. No, they are not. They have filed charges today. We just found out this story just breaking against the man who allegedly tried to spray Ilhan Omar with the substance from a syringe during a town hall in Minneapolis this week. His name is Anthony Kazmarchak. I think that's how you say it. He faces a count alleging that he forcibly assaulted, opposed, impeded, intimidated an officer and employee of the United States while she was engaged in official duties. The affidavit alleges that he told a close associate years ago that somebody should kill that bee in reference to Ilhan Omar. After Omar called for Homeland Security Secretary to resign at a meeting on Tuesday, he appeared to say, "She's not resigning. You're splitting Minnesotans apart," after spraying her, according to the FBI. According to the representative, the liquid stained her clothes and may have reached her face and right eye, according to the FBI affidavit. Now, here's the thing, guys. I know President Trump has said this is a fake. I will tell you that if this guy is legit, you can't go around charging at congressional representatives. Or maybe letting them charge at you might have been more apropos because she really came at him. But you can't do that. And if he's indeed legit and if he's one of these people, then he should have the book thrown at him. Send him away. But let me tell you why I just think this is a little strange. I think it's a little strange that when someone sprays you with stinky liquid in this day and age, you don't even take a breather to go wash it off of you? A mystery brown liquid, and you're like, oh, cool, we can just keep going? I'm going to tell you, I've been in some weird situations at speaking engagements. I would step aside, probably wipe my face off, make sure it wasn't like some sort of poison, then go back to the podium and continue my speech. I wouldn't just stand there. Anybody else? And apparently this guy wrote a letter to his neighbors saying that he might be in jail and could they feed his dog? I mean, he could be a nut. He could be a wackadoodle. I think it's probably safe to say that he is a wackadoodle. But it sure seemed like she wasn't too disturbed about getting sprayed with the brown stink. I don't know. There you go. The DOJ filing charges today. Thanks so much for joining us. It is Common Sense for the American People, the Scott Jennings Show. I'm Jennifer Horn.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Well, not quite. No fake news here on this program. It is the Scott Jennings Show. Scott is out today. I'm Jennifer Horn. Happy to be filling in for him. I am broadcasting from studios of Salem Media in Los Angeles. I host the Morning Answer on Salem Radio, AM 870, AM 590. The Answer. Hope you'll join us if you can listen in. You can stream on am870.info. How about that? All right, so let's jump into it. A lot to talk about today. We have President Trump's cabinet meeting, which is underway. Some updates there. We also are closer to a government shutdown. We are going to talk about that. And of course, the situation continuing to unfold in Minneapolis. Tom Homan, the border czar, holding a press conference today to talk about how the unity with city officials, they could create it, could actually result in a drawdown of federal agents within the city. But as I mentioned, I'm sitting here in Los Angeles. My mom was a school teacher for the LA Unified School District for 30 years. Probably tells you a lot that she sent me to private school. I went to Catholic school 12 years of my life, not to public school because she worked for the LA Unified School District. She knew what it was all about. But joining us right now to talk about a scandal in Los Angeles with the school district is Aiden Bozzetti. He is the president of the 1776 Project Foundation. The 1776 Project Foundation filed a lawsuit against the LA Unified School District claiming it discriminates against white students. Aiden, welcome to the Scott Jennings Show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
All right, so explain the situation here. What was going on with the LA Unified School District?
So we basically found that Los Angeles Unified Public Schools has had a program called PHBAO, which stands for the Predominantly Hispanic, Black, Asian, and Other Non-Anglo. And they use this designation for schools as a way to allocate extra funding and assign certain preferences to schools that are assigned this category, PHBAO, which means fundamentally that they have a student body that is under 30% white. So they're over 70% minority students. Mm-hmm. This was a result of a court order back from the 1980s, the early 1980s, but they've warped this program so badly that it functionally discriminates against all of the white and Middle Eastern students in the entire district. So if you are a white student or a Middle Eastern student and you go to a public school in Los Angeles and that individual school is over 30% white or Middle Eastern, which are included in this program as white, your school loses funding. You lose money for teachers and administrators, which we believe violates not only the United States Constitution, but also the Civil Rights Act and the Californian Constitution. And we have a plaintiff, a member of our organization, who wants to stop this program that has been harmed by this program, and that's what we're going to do.
This is incredible. So to reiterate, if a school has a majority-minority demographic, then they are given more funds to teach the students than those in more predominantly white areas.
It's not just more funds. They also have a set number of parent-teacher conferences and additional points for their magnet application program. And the really funny thing here is that it only applies to schools that are over 70% minority. So if your individual school is, let's say, for example, 35% white and 65% minority, those minority students also lose out on those benefits. So it is racially discriminating against white and Middle Eastern students, but it also negatively impacts all of the minority students in those schools too. And in Los Angeles, the student body is with 10% white. So it is functionally discriminating against a minority of the students, but also hurting the majority. And this really weird, this twisting of a court order from over 40 years ago.
That's incredible. And you know, we pay so much to live in Los Angeles. We pay so much to live in California, and a lot of the money from our property taxes goes to fund these schools. I think people would be appalled to hear that this funding is being doled out in such a way that race should come to play, instead of just going, hey, we've got 10,000 students to deal with in this area, we've got 5,000 in this area. Everybody should be looked at as an individual. So where are we with this lawsuit that you filed?
So we just filed it last week. We were assigned our judge, and we're going to be proceeding. First, we're going to prove our standing to make sure that we as an organization and our plaintiff, we are representing, has standing to sue the school district, which we do believe this will be the case. And then we will proceed to discovery. And we are expecting to find more in discovery than what they currently have on the website. And the reason this lawsuit came about in the first place is because they were openly bragging about the program. We didn't have to dive into archives for the school district to find this. This was on their website. It was publicly available information.
You know, if school districts can allocate based on race, where does this stop? I mean, it seems to me that this is a very slippery slope for us to be going down.
Exactly. It is 100% illegal. Right. We've had criticism from people at outlets like the LA Times who say that, you know, this isn't really discrimination because white people still have power. Right. Even though the majority of the elected officials in LA County itself are obviously they're minorities. They are not white. But somehow white students who make up 10% of the population have the power. And so this program is fine. The buck stops here, right? We're going to send a message to school districts and really local governments all across the country that you cannot use racial preferencing to assign benefits, regardless of what the program is. And luckily, we have Supreme Court precedent on our side here, and that's why we do believe we will be able to stop this program permanently.
Tell us about that precedent, because I think that's an interesting piece, is that obviously you're going to need programs sometimes to help disadvantaged students, but I would imagine there's ways that you can do that are, should we say, race neutral?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we already have in federal law ways to give more money to disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, students who are low income, right? Those programs already exist, and LAUSC uses that to assign funding already. What they have is an extra program that uses the racial makeup of individual schools and the student population to assign extra benefits. Mm-hmm. It's pretty easy to stop that program and reorient in a way that is perfectly in compliant with the law. We know that as a result of the Students for Fair Admissions case at the Supreme Court, that if the government is implementing a racially discriminatory policy, it has to pass what's called strict scrutiny, which means that it needs to have a very narrow scope and a very narrow period that it is in place. Because this results from an order from 4 decades ago, we're basically arguing that it is not applicable to the modern era. Right? This is the makeup of LA has completely changed. Right? This suit originates from the 1960s. Even from the 1960s to the 1980s, the county went from majority white to majority non-white. That decision is completely out of touch with the modern United States, with our current law, and with the makeup of the school district. So that is our argument, that this program really does not pass strict scrutiny, and we should be able to pause it permanently.
Yeah, I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life, and the demographics have absolutely shifted in that time, for sure. That's beyond the scope of my lifetime, but it has shifted in my lifetime. All right, final moments with you. We have just about 30 seconds, and I would imagine, Aiden, that this is not just the LA Unified School District, that it's important to take a stand here, because I can imagine that other policies and other sectors are going to be influenced by programs like this.
Exactly. And I would say if you're interested in following along with our case, go to foundation1776.org/LA. We will be sharing updates on the case and making sure that local elected officials, whether it's on the school board, on the city level or higher, that you cannot racially discriminate against Americans. It does not matter what the program is. It doesn't matter what it's for. If you're using race as a factor, it is 100% illegal.
It is incredible that we have to have this conversation, but I'm sure glad that we have. Aiden Bazzetti, give us that website one more time.
Go to foundation1776.org/LA.
All right, we will check that out. President of the 1776 Project Foundation, Aiden Bazzetti, it was great chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we will be following along for updates as you move this case forward. All right, guys, there is a lot more up ahead. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Saving Western civilization, one busted leftist narrative at a time. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Yes, it is. Thanks for joining us. It is the Scott Jennings Show, common sense for the American people. I'm Jennifer Horn. Happy to be filling in for my friend Scott today. And a lot of breaking news to tell you about. Tomorrow is D-Day. Not really, but it is time to decide whether or not the government is going to fund itself, or we are headed for another government shutdown, a partial government shutdown, perhaps. President Trump had a cabinet meeting this morning and said that he hopes that we'll avoid that. Let's take a listen, cut 10.
Hopefully we won't have a shutdown. And we're working on that right now. I think we're getting close. The Democrats, I don't believe, want to see it either. So we'll work in a very bipartisan way. I believe not to have a shutdown. We don't want a shutdown. And just yesterday, the S&P 500 hit 7,000 for the first time ever.
All right, so President Trump says he hopes that the government doesn't shut down, and then gives himself a little economic news, and it is good news, to be sure. But what's not such great news is that Senate Democrats stayed true to their threat by blocking a funding package. But here's the surprise. This is the breaking news, that they were joined by several Senate Republicans to derail the legislation. This is Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and his caucus, of course, have made it no secret that they would obstruct the government funding process over the last several days, demanding Republicans strip the DHS funding bill from the 6-bill package. But here's what's a little crazy. This, again, is just breaking. 7 GOP senators backed out as well, backed into the Democrats' camp. Those Republicans include Senators Ted Budd from North Carolina, Ron Johnson, he's a goodie, from Wisconsin, Mike Lee from Utah, Ashley Moody from Florida, Rand Paul, no surprise, from Kentucky, Rick Scott. That's a surprise from Florida. And here's the biggest surprise of them all, Tommy Tuberville from Alabama. Senate Democrats are saying they're willing to support the 5 other bills in the package, but they've reiterated that the bundle would easily pass if given the chance without DHS funding. Democrats are ready to avert a shutdown, according to Patty Murray, the senator from Washington. She says, we have 5 bills we all agree on, but 95% of the remaining budget is ready to go. She said, we passed those 5 bills, no problem. Leader Thune, all he has to do is tee them up for a vote. Now, John Thune himself decided to call their bluff and went forward with the key test vote, which would have opened up several hours of debate and eventually a final vote to send the package to President Trump tomorrow. Ahead of that vote, Thune said he hoped that the conversations between the White House and Senate Democrats would produce the votes necessary to get it passed. He threw cold water on Senate Democrats' several demands for reforms to ICE, making their way into the current package, too. He said that's not going to happen with this bill, and we'll see. The 6-bill package includes major funding bills for the Pentagon and other agencies now scuttled. Senate Republicans in the White House are looking for a plan B now to keep the government open, or at least minimize damage if there is indeed a partial shutdown. Now, there are some options on the table, which are always worth discussing. There's always something that can be done. And one of the options that seems to be gaining steam right now amongst Republicans would be to strip the DHS funding bill from the broader package, advance the smaller 5-bill bundle, and then turn to a short-term funding extension, a continuing resolution, just for the Homeland Security piece of that. There's ongoing negotiations among Senate Democrats and the White House on that particular idea to see if they can make that through. President Trump has been consistent, according to the White House. He wants the government to remain open, and the administration has been working with both parties to ensure the American people don't have to endure another shutdown. And let me tell you, do we have it in us? I mean, I'm always one of those people, I have to admit. I don't know if Scott would like this or not, but I'm one of those people who just says, shut it down. Shut her down. Let's see how effective the government really is. But when you have times like this, when you have the unrest that's going on in Minneapolis, when you have members of our military who need to get paid, when you have midterm elections just around the corner, it's probably best if they can just come to the table, make a deal. Make a deal. Let's try to keep it open. So apparently, and also because we've got these natural disasters, the weather that's been plaguing the middle of the country and the East Coast, you need that FEMA money to help those people dig out from disaster. They say any modification to the current 6-bill package would require the House to agree to it. And that is true also for the continuing resolution if they go with Plan B. Now, we don't know where the House stands on this, but certainly it's a close majority, tough majority for Republicans. They were able to pass these bills over to the Senate, but with changes, would they be able to really make it happen? Schumer said that if there is a shutdown, there is one man to blame. I'll let you guess. We've got big prizes around here. Yes, he wants to blame John Thune and President Trump and Republicans. He said if the funding lapses, it's because of Leader Thune. Very predictable. If you're playing the home edition, Democrats always seem to blame those Republicans. All right, we have more up ahead, and we will be back. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
The one thing you can count on here on this show, we tell the truth. You can count on it. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
You know something? Universities are kind of a bad deal. 6 figures of debt for a bachelor's degree that signals less every year. 4 years spent navigating ideological rules instead of learning how to think. Grades inflated, standards lowered, dissent punished. We call it higher education, but it's mostly expensive daycare with a credential attached. The University of Austin, also known as UATX, is different, however. Admissions at UATX are based on test scores alone. No essays, no resumes. Nobody cares who your parents know. If you're smart enough, you're in. UATX students turned down UChicago and fled Barnard to complete a demanding great books core, including Aristotle, Shakespeare, de Tocqueville, alongside real math, science, economics, and AI. Classes are small, professors actually know your name, grades aren't padded, excellence is measured and rewarded. From day one, students work directly with top founders, investors, and institutions, building companies, doing serious research, and landing real internships. And here's the part that changes everything. There is no tuition. Thanks to private donors, every UATX student graduates debt-free. You're free to take risks, free to start companies, and free to build a life instead of paying off loans. If you want an empty credential, look elsewhere. If you want a serious education that actually prepares you to lead, apply to the University of Austin. Visit uaustin.org. That's uaustin.org.
Quelling leftist arguments with truth and common sense. They hate that. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
That's why we are happy warriors delivering common sense to contradict all the lefty garbage that's out there. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings today, and happy to be along with all of you. Joining us right now is Chad Mizelle, and he is the DOJ's chief of staff and former DHS chief of staff. He was a general counsel all during Trump 45. And welcome to the program, Chad Mizelle. It is great to have you here. All of this, Chad, on the backdrop of Tom Homan's press conference today, where it seems like he is trying to return some sensibility amongst the chaos in Minneapolis. Did you have a chance to see the border czar today? What did you make of his words?
I was really encouraged by it, but I'll say, Jennifer, the thing that struck me the most was when he was talking about what the immigration agents go through every single day.
Yes. I've
been fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time with Tom Homan. I know him fairly well. And when you hear the stories of what he encountered both in ICE, but then also during some of his time at the border, of kids being thrown into the river, where Border Patrol is having to jump in and save them, provide CPR, while you see drug traffickers and bad guys running, 100 yards, 200 yards away to escape. Whenever you hear stories of women raped, of kids being left out in the cold, this is traumatic stuff, PTSD-inducing things that every single immigration agent is going through. And then on top of all of that, you have the agitators in Minneapolis. You have people who are attacking them violently, blowing whistles in their ear, throwing objects at them. We are putting these people in what is nearly in an impossible situation and asking heroic things from them, and they're delivering.
That's one of the things that I think people don't realize. I've heard a lot of people on our side of the aisle, Chad, who are more conservative, who say, well, it just needs to be more training. We just aren't training these people as well. Now, it's amazing. I'm a miracle baby. I'm only 29 years old, but I've been doing radio for 30 years. Just kidding. But I've been doing radio a long time, which would tell you that I have been trained for over 20 years in radio. But if someone's blowing a whistle at me, if someone's spitting at me, if someone's hitting me, I don't care how trained I am, it's going to be really hard to do my job. And that's what's happening on the streets. These agitators are not protesters. They are not holding signs and chanting and singing dumb songs. They are inserting themselves into really bad situations under very tense circumstances.
Jennifer, that's exactly right. And frankly, I think it's even worse than that. It's more insidious than that. This is a game plan that is being followed systematically. Step one of the game plan, create confusion. The way you do that is by loud whistles, screaming, yelling. You don't necessarily know where an attack is going to come from. You don't know where a target's going to come from.
That's right.
Step two, act recklessly and dangerously. This is what we see whenever we see someone like Alex Peretti kicking the taillight out of an SUV or spitting at officers or trying to tackle officers or getting in the way of an ongoing law enforcement operation. They're literally putting their lives into a dangerous and reckless situation. And then step three, and this is the part where we are now, at least with the Peretti shooting, whenever law enforcement does take action, immediately play the victim. Immediately play the victim. And that's what we're seeing across the country. The thing that disappoints me is that some Republicans, are dumb enough to fall for this playbook again and again and again.
Yeah.
Guys, we've seen this. Whenever you interfere with a law enforcement investigation, whenever you carry a gun contrary to Minnesota law, whenever you are violent towards law enforcement, something bad is bound to happen. It won't happen in every circumstance. It shouldn't happen in every circumstance. But in some circumstances, it may happen. And when that happens, they film it, they put it out there, and then they want to demonize all of law enforcement. And that's what I think we really need to stand up against.
And I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because there are so many people on the right who are now starting to soften and say, we don't like this. We need to get everybody out of there. It is the worst possible idea to draw down or to kowtow to the pressure that leftists are throwing at us right now. If you do that, you literally put the lives of every member of law enforcement in danger. Because I'm in Los Angeles. If they don't like what the police or the sheriff's department are doing, then you've just told them that if you're loud enough, disruptive enough, violent enough, we'll stop. If you are worried about enforcement in immigration enforcement officials in Maine, this is all you have to do, is to say, oh, there's the blueprint. You just have to be annoying enough, violent enough to get this to stop. That is not the example that President Trump is going to make here. He's not going to give them that gift.
That's exactly right. And also, did we think that this was going to be easy? Did we think that the 13 million illegal aliens who are in this country because of Joe Biden were, as soon as Trump got elected, say, you know what, you caught us, the game is up, we're going to leave peacefully? Of course not. I mean, we're not idiots. We don't have to put our brains away whenever we come into power.
Yeah.
And yet that is what some Republicans seem to be doing. Of course it's going to be difficult. Of course there's going to be resistance. Of course somebody who's been in this country for 4 years illegally under Joe Biden, making money illegally, potentially committing crimes illegally, of course they're going to resist whenever you tell them they have to go back to their home country. But that is why we have law enforcement. It's not always pretty. It's not always the best thing to look at, but it's necessary to keep us safe.
Chad Mizelle is with us, DOJ's Chief of Staff and former DHS Chief of Staff and General Counsel during Trump 45. You've had some incredible experience. So let's start with your DOJ experience. What is the role of the Department of Justice right now today? And there's so many different issues. You don't just have to worry about prosecutions or finding criminal illegal immigrants and threats against the United States, but I'd imagine, Chad, you're also looking at the people who are getting these agitators out there, the people behind those signal chats. You have to worry about that. There are so many different things that the DOJ has to be keeping an eye on right now. Explain what they must be going through today.
Right now, you have a multifaceted process. So you have folks in Minnesota and Minneapolis through the U.S. Attorney's Office leading investigation efforts to figure out potential prosecution targets. I know that the Attorney General posted, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, on her X account, pictures of a number of individuals, agitators, protesters, who they had arrested, right? That work is going to continue. You also have the FBI, ATF, DEA, and the U.S. Marshals all working hand in hand together. You know, when I was at the Department of Justice, and, you know, I'm a former Chief of Staff at DOJ. I left a few months ago, but while I was there, I had the benefit of working really, really closely with the heads of all of these various subcomponents of DOJ. So working with Cash, working with the head of the Marshals, working with DEA, all of those things, seeing how well they work together and knowing that what they are doing is trying to root this out. So I think that what you're going to see out of DOJ are not just some of the sort of quick and easy arrests and prosecutions, but some deeper, longer-running investigations that are start to be made public here soon.
You probably have heard, again, speaking about people on the Republican side of the aisle, people getting frustrated with the speed at which charges, prosecutions are coming out of the Department of Justice. I always say that just because the Biden DOJ was politicized and corrupted doesn't mean that the Trump DOJ needs to be, and that sometimes you have to take the time to make sure you get the case right, that it's ironclad so that you actually have something worth pursuing. And I think that's really important. So I always ask people for a little time and a little patience. But what can you tell us about the holdup with these agitators that plowed into the church? And can you give us some perspective, even though the story seems like now 5 years ago, about journalist Don Lemon, who also went in with them, who admittedly I thought, okay, he was there covering the story. Maybe there weren't charges that should have been appropriate against him. But when you listen to his videos, he was very much a part of the action in that church. Can you speak to that, the process, and how it might take a little longer and why it does?
One of the things that's become abundantly clear to all Americans is that there's a double standard.
Yeah.
There's a double standard within the judiciary. There's a double standard when it comes to getting warrants, right? The fact that you could have a grandmother with an open door walking through the Capitol Rotunda, a public place, and nonetheless be charged with a crime and be put away potentially, I think in that instance for a decent amount of time in jail, and nobody questioned whether there was probable cause. Nobody questioned, any of the, or certainly our side questioned, but none of the judges did.
Yeah.
None of the prosecutors did. Versus here, you have individuals going into a church service, and you have the judges themselves who are really acting more like defense lawyers, saying, well, wait a second, government, did they hit anybody? Did they punch anybody? Were they violent? Or were they just getting in the face of people who had a First Amendment right to worship and distracting them from that worship? I mean, this is the kind of level of interference, I think, and really sort of judicial sabotage that you're having to deal with. And I'll note that for anybody who disagrees and says, hey, it's not sabotage, these are just judges, they're following the law, the Trump administration is lawless, I always remind them of this fact. In 90% of cases that have gone up to the Supreme Court, the Trump administration has prevailed.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has said we were right 90% of the time. This is not a lawless administration. This is an administration that for the first time is following the law. Right? We're not letting illegals into the country. We are following and using every single law that Congress gave us. And despite the judicial sabotage that's oftentimes happening at the district court level, when we go up on appeal and when we go up to the Supreme Court, were successful.
All right, just about 30 seconds left here, Chad, but it is important to remember that we were all focused on Minneapolis because of the fraud. Is it possible to make sure that the DOJ is staying on that fraud investigation in Minneapolis while all of this craziness is breaking out in the streets?
I was really, really pleased when the president nominated Colin McDonald, who is a friend. He's somebody I've gotten to know very, very well, worked very closely with, to be the new Assistant Attorney General in charge of the new fraud division. Mm-hmm. And I know his very, very first task is going to be to get to the bottom of this Minnesota fraud. So I have every confidence in Colin, every confidence in the Department of Justice, every confidence in Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, Todd Blanche, the deputy. I know that they're going to get the job done.
You know, it is. I'm so glad to see that. And that was some breaking news today that he did finally announce his Assistant Attorney General for fraud, because this is why Jacob Fry, this is why Governor Tim Walz, they love to throw that gasoline on the fire. Not only does it give them a chance to rip down the United States, but it gives us a chance to distract from the real problems in their state. And it happens in my state of California too. So we're well aware of how that game goes. Chad, what a great day to have you on the program. Thank you so much for all of your insight. Chad Mizelle, you can give him a follow, Chad_Mizelle, Mizelle on X. Chad, thanks so much for joining us on the Scott Jennings Show. We appreciate you.
Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. All right, guys, there is still more up ahead. An attack in Los Angeles, a case of mistaken identity, as the Scott Jennings Show continues.
News, comment, and the stories and facts the mainstream media refuses to discuss. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It sure is. We thank you for joining us, and welcome back. I'm Jennifer Horn in for Scott Jennings today. Don't forget, if you are missing Scott, you can follow him on X. Jennings Show is where you can follow him on social media. You can download podcasts as well, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find me on social media too. Jennifer Horn on X and on Truth, and Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and on Facebook. Love to have you part of the conversation there. Now, you know, there are just a lot of ding-dongs running around the earth. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a large deposit of ding-dongs in Los Angeles, my hometown. And, well, they were on full display this last week. A mob, described by the California Post as dim-witted, and I would agree with them, chased a trio of federal air marshals from a Los Angeles restaurant on Wednesday evening after mistaking them for ICE agents. That's right. Activists using Signal sounded the false alarm that a couple at dinner were with ICE. So immediately, you get a bunch of weirdos swarming the restaurant and even attacking the people who ended up just being TSA employees. The three marshals were dining at a Korean barbecue restaurant at Plaza Mexico in Linwood when the mob, spurred on by social media rumors, rushed to confront them. You could hear, and we would play some of it for you, but there's a lot of cussing in this video. But some of the people would say, you like to harass people. How does it feel to be blanking harassed yourself? Infuriated protesters screaming at one of the air marshals as he just attempted to leave the restaurant. Now, they tried to tell him, guys, we're air marshals. We're not ICE. No ICE here. Well, apparently they didn't believe him. Protesters rejected the statement, replying, quote, he didn't deny accusations that he was an ICE agent. This is how quickly this Signal platform works. By the time some, again, I hate to overuse the word ding dong, but it's appropriate here, sees these people, thinks that they're ICE agents, they're actually TSA, they're air marshals. It takes 12 minutes for protesters, more than a dozen of them, to get to the restaurant and to surround these marshals that looked very confused, if you look at the video, saying that they witnessed him making an arrest the previous day. So one of the air marshals happened to be Asian. He said, it might be an Asian guy, suggesting that they had confused him with someone else. But he goes, I just showed you my credentials. I'm an air marshal. The crowd got so rowdy that the LA Sheriff's Department was called in to help, prompting dozens of deputies from 2 stations to arrive at the scene, according to local CBS affiliate Channel 2. Videos shared on social media show the deputies establishing a skirmish line between the screaming protests and the unlucky marshals in the parking lot. The air marshals ultimately had to be escorted out of the restaurant and put into an unmarked van and taken away for their safety. Is this insane? Is this just how crazy we are? We just have to go after ICE because social media tells us to? Unreal. Maybe they're being prompted, guys, by people like Stephen Colbert, who, by the way, is going off the air. I like to remind myself of that. Real quick, let's play cut 8.
But Vito went on complaining. Look, Dana, they're trying to portray Border Patrol agents and ICE agents as Gestapo, Nazi, and many other words.
Yes, do not compare ICE or Border Patrol agents to the Nazis. That's an unfair comparison. The Nazis were willing to show their faces.
So maybe, just maybe, it's people like Stephen Colbert calling ICE agents Nazis that are causing people to lose their minds. So much so that even the mere thought that there could be an ICE agent having dinner has to be stopped by these protesters in Los Angeles, even though they were air marshals. You had this actor, Breitbart, reporting on it, this Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad, who basically came out and said, we just need to take everything down. We need to kill each other. 50 million people die. No problem. We need a whole new world. We need a new world order. That's the kind of psycho behavior we are dealing with. So go out there, be happy warriors, spread the truth, bring the common sense like you get from Scott Jennings, and don't let these people intimidate you, because you know what? We have lots of work to do to save this country. All right, you can give me a follow, Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and Facebook, Jennifer Horn on X and on Truth. Follow The Jennings Show always. It's always great to stay in touch with everything that Scott is doing. He's the world's busiest man, and he's all over the place. So make sure you give him a follow on social media as well. And thanks so much for joining us today. What a pleasure to sit in. Thanks to the whole crew, to Jared and the gang, to producer Sean. We're going to go get some Korean barbecue with the air marshals. How about that? Thanks for joining us. Jennifer Horn in for Scott. It's the Scott Jennings Show.